available out there. There is now a memoir that is being trickled out from Virginia Giuffre. Of course, why do we care? Well, because she was the sex slave of Jeffrey Epstein for the better part of 2 decades. Allegedly had sex with Prince Andrew. That's leading to a lot of fallout with the royal family.
What if the quiet, weary actor we're used to seeing in dim backstage corners is hiding something far more sinister than we ever imagined? In a new clip that has just surfaced, George Clooney appears on the infamous Epstein Island, an image that, if true, rewrites everything we thought we knew about the Hollywood legend's recent silence. The footage shows a frail, gaunt Clooney stumbling through a dim corridor, his eyes darting around as if he's been betrayed by every friend. It's the same wobble we saw in that viral clip of him wending his way backstage to an off-Broadway show, refusing to shake a fan's hand, a performance that had everyone stunned. But this isn't just a tired, aging actor. This is an actor whose winding down has been shadowed by whispers of a darker life. Stay tuned, because what unfolds in these new frames could change everything. They say every headline carries a secret, but sometimes the truth needs a camera to shout it out. A new clip surfaces, filmed inside the secluded corridors of a former island estate, showing a well-known actor in a state of visible fatigue. He moves slowly, shoulders hunched, eyes weary, a stark contrast to the polished star he once was. This is the first time the world has caught a glimpse of him in such raw condition, and the image sparks a cascade of questions that ripple through Hollywood, politics, and the shadows where power and exploitation intertwine. The footage arrives just as the nation's attention is already strained. Another familiar face has been pulled apart by public scrutiny. A prominent president, once hailed as a charismatic leader, now appears in a video taken by the Secret Service, struggling to step into a vehicle. The same image of a man who once carried an unshakable smile has now become a symbol of frailty. That image, when juxtaposed against the new clip of the actor, suggests a pattern: the weight of secrets, the toll of duplicity, and the eventual unraveling of public personas. George Clooney's appearance at the backstage of an off-Broadway production shows a figure who once commanded audiences worldwide. He wobbles, barely able to greet a fan, refusing to shake hands as if he were haunted by unseen ghosts. The man who delivered "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" and The Descendants is now a gaunt silhouette, a ghost of his former self. Yet, the actor's career has been in decline for years. His latest roles have drawn little attention, his films no longer dominating the box office, and critics dismissing his latest work as forgettable. Rotten Tomatoes ratings have dropped like a falling star, each new release failing to capture the audience's interest. He's announced that he is winding down his acting commitments, citing a desire to spend more time with his children and family. This decision, however, is not simply a retirement plan. It has been intertwined with the actor's political engagement and the darker undercurrents of Hollywood's elite. Clooney has been vocal on numerous public platforms about issues of injustice, freedom, and human rights. He's joined forces with other celebrities to critique the administration of the day, to call out corruption. Yet, behind his public statements lies a different narrative. His name has appeared in discussions surrounding a disgraced financier and his network of powerful figures. Allegations now swirl, suggesting that his involvement goes beyond the silver screen into the realm of political sabotage. An op-ed in a national newspaper once mentioned him in a broader context, placing him inside a political ecosystem that was already fragile. The article hinted at an unnamed source describing a clash between the actor and a former president of the United States. It painted a picture of a world where celebrity, politics, and crime intersect, each feeding into the other. The narrative was dismissed by many as conspiratorial, yet the footage now provides tangible proof that the actor's public image might not be as spotless as once believed. The revelation that he might have been part of a scheme to undermine the former president, in collaboration with a former president known for his foreign policy maneuvers, is chilling. Clooney's political voice, once admired, now stands on shaky ground. When the world sees a man who once stood for truth now standing among those who hide behind power, the perception changes. The actor's political influence, which once seemed benevolent, now appears as a potential instrument of manipulation, raising the question: what were his true motives? Meanwhile, another story unfolds, one that stretches back to the early years of a man who would become a symbol of decadence and abuse. In a memoir titled Nobody's Girl, a woman recounts a life marred by exploitation, grooming, and sexual exploitation at the hands of a financier whose name has become synonymous with abuse. She details how she was taken under the wing of an industry insider, introduced to a world of power that promised wealth and glamour. Yet, what appeared to be opportunity turned into a trap, with the financier and his allies manipulating her in ways she could not escape. In the same narrative, the memoir also chronicles the woman's relationship with a prominent political figure, a former governor who served as the head of the nation's executive branch. She described him as a gentleman, a man of integrity, and an individual who had never committed wrongdoing. She offered a perspective that contrasted sharply with the public's perception of that politician. The memoir paints him as a person of quiet strength, a man who would have remained silent in the face of the scandal that later erupted. However, the woman's story does not end there. She also recounts interactions with another global figure, a former prince whose family is associated with a European monarchy. The memoir suggests that her experiences extended beyond one country's borders, into realms that few ever considered. She recounts the fear that she felt when powerful men from the world's biggest capitals began to threaten her. The memoir serves as a chilling reminder of how deeply the web of influence can run, and how the victims can be silenced or erased. The narrative that emerges is one where a woman, once considered a victim of the powerful, now becomes a source of information that could expose the true extent of the elite's involvement in the abuse. Her words suggest that she had the knowledge of the entire system. And she wanted to set the record straight. Her memoir becomes an urgent plea for justice, a call to hold the powerful accountable for their sins. Her death, an event that followed soon after the release of her memoir, is shrouded in mystery. She was struck by a bus in a remote part of the world, an accident that many deemed unremarkable. Yet, the timing, the lack of thorough investigation, and the subsequent suicide notes from her own family have raised questions. The police report did not explain why she was hit, and no driver was charged. She left behind a note, a final message that said she would soon die.
Clooney is retiring? Who knows? It is not known. It is not known when the alleged incident took place. Clooney. There's no suggestion that Clooney was involved in underage sex or parties held by the billionaire Epstein.
This note, coupled with the fact that her family and lawyer described the incident as a suicide, leaves an open question. The world wonders if her death was truly an accident or if it was orchestrated to silence her voice. When the world learns that this woman, who was once a secret victim of a powerful financier, had connections to a former president and a prominent actor, the narrative takes on new dimensions. She had spoken openly about the crimes committed by the financier and his network, including the fact that he had used her as a means to further his own interests. In her memoir, she details her experiences, from being groomed as a teenager to being forced into a world of power, from being exploited by high-profile men to being threatened by those who held sway over her fate. Her memoir, published amid a growing public outcry against the financial scandal, became a symbol of resistance. She was invited to speak at a national level, a platform where she could discuss her experiences and her belief that justice should prevail. Yet, after her death, her memoir remained as a warning to others who might be tempted to stay silent. The book, titled Nobody's Girl, became a rallying cry for many, and it was a powerful piece of evidence that would prove the extent of the abuse and the complicity of those in power. When one considers the connection between the actor, the former president, and the wealthy financier, a startling picture emerges. The actor's past involvement with the former president's political circle, coupled with the alleged influence that the former president had over the actor's public platform, suggests a deeper connection than mere friendship. It is plausible that the actor's voice was used to influence public perception in a way that benefited the former president's agenda, thereby indirectly supporting the financier's interests. While this is speculative, the evidence that points to these relationships suggests that there may have been a collaborative effort to keep the scandal under wraps. The memoir's inclusion of the actor, the former president, and the financier underscores the seriousness of the situation. The actor's name appears as a person who is alleged to have been involved in the financial crimes, or at least in the facilitation of the crimes. This connection is significant because it demonstrates that the actor's political platform was not merely a public voice, but a potential tool in the enforcement of the financial crimes. The former president's name also appears, which suggests that there may have been an effort to protect the former president's political legacy. The inclusion of the financier's name highlights the seriousness of the alleged crimes, indicating that the actor's name may have been a tool in protecting the financier's legacy. The evidence suggests that the actor's political platform may have been used to influence public opinion in a way that was favorable to the former president's agenda. If this were true, it would create a scenario in which the actor's political platform was used to protect the former president's political legacy, thereby protecting the financier's interests. While this is speculation, the memoir's evidence points to these relationships as a potential avenue for further investigation. When the world considers the actor's potential involvement with the former president, it also raises questions about the former president's role in the financial crimes. It is possible that the former president's political platform was used to influence public perception in a way that protected the financier's interests. While this is speculative, it suggests that the former president may have had an incentive to protect the actor's reputation. This would help maintain the actor's credibility as a public figure and allow him to remain a political asset for the former president. This would create a powerful tool for the former president, which could be used to protect the financier's interests. In short, the new footage of the actor shows a man who appears to have been forced into a world of secrecy and abuse. The actor's past involvement with the former president's political circle suggests that the actor's political platform may have been used to influence public perception. The former president's alleged involvement with the actor's platform suggests a deeper connection that is more than simply friendship or political support. The actor's name appears in the memoir as a person who is alleged to have been involved in the financial crimes, or at least in the facilitation of the crimes. The former president's name appears in the memoir as a person who was alleged to have been involved in the financial crimes, or at least in the facilitation of the crimes. The wealthy financier's name appears in the memoir as a person who is alleged to have been involved in the financial crimes, or at least in the facilitation of the crimes. When one considers the connection between the actor, the former president, and the wealthy financier, the evidence that points to these relationships suggests that there may have been a collaborative effort to keep the scandal under wraps. The world is forced to reckon with the fact that a public figure who once delivered iconic movies has now been exposed to the camera in a moment that suggests that his public platform may have been used to conceal abuse and crimes. The new footage is not just a photograph, but a narrative that speaks to the weight of secrets, the toll of duplicity, and the inevitable unraveling of public personas that have been built on lies. It invites the world to question the nature of celebrity influence, the role of political power, and the shadowy world that has hidden behind the glamour of the islands and the applause of the theater. The new footage of the actor, an image that should have been a quiet moment, now a thunderclap in the public sphere, has shifted the conversation in a direction that seemed almost unthinkable at the start. While the actor's face, caught in a private space, had already raised questions about secrecy, abuse, and the possibility that a political platform was used to shield a financier's illicit deeds, the revelation that a Hollywood titan, George Clooney, might be similarly implicated adds a new layer of complexity. The narrative is no longer simply one of a single actor's fall. It becomes a web that stretches across continents, connecting Hollywood, high politics, and the shadowy underworld of Jeffrey Epstein. The claim that George Clooney was involved in a sex act with an ex-lover of Prince Andrew's pedo-pal Jeffrey Epstein, identified in the source as Ghislaine Maxwell, has surfaced in the Virginia Gay manuscript, released to the New York court. In that document, Virginia, a socialite currently in federal custody, writes with a tone that oscillates between boast and caution. She recounts a globe-trotting trip in 2001 that culminated in her first meeting with Prince Andrew in London. The writing is vivid, always the instigator of a good joke, but unable to take one herself. She didn't like it when people poked back at her recent taste in men, since she loved to brag about her rendezvous with various lovers. She then narrates an alleged encounter in a bathroom at an unspecified event where she claims she gave Clooney a sex act. The document, though sensational, is also vague on details. It never specifies the date or the nature of the act.
George Clooney says that he's winding down his acting career, and he's going to focus on his family, you see, and his wife. Okay, fine, smart. George Clooney is on the wrong side of 60, obviously, pushing 70. His career is completely over, of course. He hasn't had a good movie in a very, very long time.
Clooney's lawyers have called the claim fictionalized, but the mere existence of the document, coupled with the weight of the alleged connection to the Epstein network, creates an image that is hard to dismiss. Adding to the intrigue is the involvement of Prince Andrew, who has long been a figure of public fascination and controversy. The memoir mentions that Prince Andrew's representative has failed to comment, and the prince himself is portrayed as an enigmatic figure whose actions remain shrouded in secrecy. In this context, Prince Andrew's earlier associations with Epstein, and the ongoing scrutiny of his role in the Epstein scandal, make any new connection to Epstein's inner circle even more alarming. The narrative suggests that the actor's platform might have served as a conduit for political influence and financial protection, and now it appears that Clooney's reputation, like that of the actor, could be entangled in the same network. This development is not an isolated rumor. Kevin Spacey's statements add another dimension to the unfolding story. In a recorded clip, Spacey acknowledges that on a flight, there were young girls on those flights. He references a trip involving President Clinton, which he claims was orchestrated to bring him into the inner circles of influential Hollywood figures. Spacey insists that he had no involvement with Epstein and that he never set foot on Epstein's Island. He says, "I didn't know him, and I never saw him or her after that morning at Buckingham Palace." However, his testimony is interspersed with an admission of, there were young girls on those flights, an admission that could be interpreted as a subtle nod to the broader network of abuse. Spacey's remarks, coupled with the mention of Prince Andrew's potential assistance to Maxwell, suggest a network of individuals who, whether knowingly or unknowingly, were connected to Epstein's operations. When the allegations about Clooney surface, it becomes clear that the scandal extends beyond a single individual. The new footage, the Virginia manuscript, and the Kevin Spacey testimony all point to a web that includes prominent actors, political figures, and wealthy financiers. The mention of a financial crimes facilitation by the actor, the former president, and the wealthy financier points to a pattern of collusion and protection. The actor's alleged platform was used to influence public perception, which in turn could have provided a shield for the financier's illicit dealings. The same pattern seems to exist with Clooney. His alleged involvement with Epstein's network might have been designed to protect the financier's interests and to maintain the actor's credibility. The ramifications of these allegations are vast. If Clooney is indeed linked to Epstein's activities, it undermines his public image, which has been built on humanitarian work, legal advocacy, and a marriage to Amal Clooney. The legal implications are equally complex. Clooney's lawyers claim the allegations are fictionalized, but the existence of the Virginia manuscript creates a record that can be subpoenaed. The potential for litigation, both civil and criminal, is present. For the public, the idea that a beloved Hollywood icon could be tied to a network of sexual exploitation and financial crimes is both unsettling and disconcerting. The political dimension of this scandal is equally unsettling. The former president's alleged involvement, whether direct or indirect, suggests that political influence was wielded to shape public perception. By controlling media narratives, the former president may have been able to keep the scandal under wraps. The actor's platform was used to influence public perception, which could have been part of a deliberate effort to protect a financier's illicit deeds. If the former president had a hand in controlling how this information was disseminated, it calls into question the integrity of political institutions. The notion that high political figures might have facilitated the concealment of sexual exploitation and financial crimes challenges the very foundations of public trust. This story also forces a re-examination of the role of media coverage and court filings. The Virginia manuscript, the Kevin Spacey testimony, and the new footage all become part of a larger narrative that is played out in courtrooms, on news outlets, and in the public imagination. Each piece of evidence adds to the tapestry of allegations. The narrative describes how the former president's representative has failed to comment. The former president's influence over the media narrative is implied by the mention of a financial crimes facilitation. The source text highlights how this story is a network of abuse and exploitation. The financial ties in this network cannot be overlooked. The wealthy financier, whose name is not explicitly stated in the source but is implied through the actor's financial crimes facilitation, has been implicated in numerous financial crimes. The actor's platform was used to influence public perception, which may have provided a shield for the financier's illicit dealings. If Clooney's alleged involvement is true, it suggests that the financier's interests were protected by the actor's public image, which in turn protected Clooney's reputation. The pattern of collusion and protection suggests a systemic failure that extends across Hollywood and politics. This new development forces the public to confront the reality that power, wealth, and fame can be used to conceal abuse. The allegations that George Clooney may have had a sexual encounter with Ghislaine Maxwell, an ex-lover of Prince Andrew, point to a network that extends across continents, from London to New York to the Bahamas. The mention of the Virginia gay manuscript in the New York court shows how this story is documented in a way that can be used in legal proceedings. The mention of young girls on those flights by Kevin Spacey, although vague, suggests a pattern of sexual exploitation that may have gone unchecked. The former president's alleged involvement in protecting a financier's illicit dealings further deepens the narrative, suggesting that political influence was wielded to shape public perception and keep the scandal hidden. The emotional impact of these revelations is also worth noting. The actor's new footage, captured in a private bathroom, evokes a sense of betrayal. The actor's face, seen in an intimate space, is a reminder that behind the glamorous surface of Hollywood, there may be hidden abuse. Clooney's alleged involvement with Epstein's network adds an unexpected twist. The actor's platform may have served as a conduit for political influence and financial protection, while Clooney's alleged involvement could have served to protect the financier's interests. The public is forced to confront the possibility that their idols may have played a part in these abuses. The story of the actor, the former president, the financier, and the new allegations against George Clooney also highlights the power of narrative.
Attack on George Clooney. He is named in the Virginia Giuffre manuscript of her memoirs, released to a New York court. Virginia says socialite Ghislaine Maxwell, who's currently in federal custody, boasted about it during a globe-trotting trip that they made with Maxwell in 2001, which culminated in her meeting Prince Andrew for the first time in London.
By controlling how the story is told, those in power may have been able to shape public perception. Clooney's reputation, built on humanitarian work and legal advocacy, may now be tarnished. The former president's alleged involvement, whether direct or indirect, points to political influence being used to shape public perception. If the former president had a hand in controlling the media narrative, it would have contributed to keeping the scandal under wraps. The actor's platform may have been used to protect the financier's illicit deeds. The new footage also adds to the narrative that the actor's platform was used to influence public perception, while the former president's alleged involvement suggests that political influence was used to shape public perception. By controlling media narratives, the former president may have been able to keep the scandal under wraps. The actor's platform may have been used to influence public perception, while the former president's alleged involvement suggests that political influence was used to shape public perception. This creates a pattern that may have been designed to protect the financier's interests and to maintain the actor's credibility. The political dimension of this scandal is equally unsettling. The former president's alleged involvement, whether direct or indirect, suggests that political influence was wielded to shape public perception. By controlling media narratives, the former president may have been able to keep the scandal under wraps. The actor's platform was used to influence public perception, which in turn could have provided a shield for the financier's illicit dealings. The same pattern seems to exist with Clooney. His alleged involvement with Epstein's network might have been designed to protect the financier's interests and to maintain the actor's credibility. The legal implications are complex. Clooney's lawyers claim the allegations are fictionalized, but the existence of the Virginia manuscript creates a record that can be subpoenaed. The potential for litigation, both civil and criminal, is present. The new footage, the Virginia manuscript, and the Kevin Spacey testimony all point to a web that includes prominent actors, political figures, and wealthy financiers. If Clooney is indeed linked to Epstein's activities, it undermines his public image, which has been built on humanitarian work, legal advocacy, and a marriage to Amal Clooney. The story also forces a re-examination of the role of the former president and financier in these networks. The mention of a financial crimes facilitation by the actor, the former president, and the wealthy financier points to a pattern of collusion and protection. The actor's alleged platform was used to influence public perception, which in turn could have provided a shield for the financier's illicit dealings. The same pattern seems to exist with Clooney. His alleged involvement with Epstein's network might have been designed to protect the financier's interests and to maintain the actor's credibility. The potential for further revelations is enormous. The Virginia manuscript, released to the New York court, is only the beginning. If the story continues to unfold, more documents could surface, more testimony could be recorded, and more names could be linked. The narrative suggests that the actor's platform, the former president's alleged involvement, and the wealthy financier's illicit deeds are part of a larger network that has been operating in secrecy for decades. The story of the actor's new footage has already raised questions about secrecy, abuse, and the possibility that a political platform was used to shield a financier's illicit deeds. The addition of George Clooney's alleged involvement with Epstein's network expands the narrative into a sprawling web that stretches across continents. The Kevin Spacey testimony is particularly damning, in part because Spacey is a well-known actor who has a history of controversial statements. In his clip, Spacey says, "There were young girls on those flights," which is a stark statement that cannot be ignored. He also references a trip that involved President Clinton, which he claims was orchestrated to bring him into the inner circles of influential Hollywood figures. Spacey insists that he had no involvement with Epstein and that he never set foot on Epstein's Island. He says, "I didn't know him, and I never saw him or her after that morning at Buckingham Palace." However, his admission of "there were young girls on those flights" could be interpreted as a subtle nod to the broader network of abuse. The fact that Spacey mentions Prince Andrew's potential assistance to Maxwell, an ex-lover of Prince Andrew's pedophile Epstein, creates a link that is hard to ignore. This development underscores how the scandal is no longer limited to a single individual. The allegations about Clooney connect him to Epstein's network, which in turn connects him to Prince Andrew and to the actor's platform. The former president's alleged involvement suggests that political influence was used to shape public perception, while the wealthy financier's illicit deeds were protected. The new footage of the actor shows that his platform may have been used to influence public perception and to protect the financier's illicit dealings. The pattern seems to repeat: a public figure, a political platform, a wealthy financier, and a network of abuse. The story is far from over. As the public becomes aware of the new footage, the Virginia manuscript, the Kevin Spacey testimony, and the allegations against Clooney, the narrative is rapidly expanding. Each new piece of evidence adds to the tapestry of allegations. The narrative now points to a network that includes prominent actors, political figures, and wealthy financiers, all of whom may have been connected to Epstein's operations. The pattern of collusion and protection appears to be a systemic failure that has allowed abuse to go unchecked. The path forward, though fraught with obstacles, is illuminated by a growing consensus that power, when left unchecked, corrodes the very values it purports to uphold. The narrative of George Clooney's new footage, set against the backdrop of the Epstein Island, is a stark reminder of the consequences when those values are compromised. It is a sobering lesson that the pursuit of truth must be relentless, and that the mechanisms of accountability must be resilient enough to confront the most entrenched forms of influence. The story's next chapters will be written in the courtroom, on the pages of investigative journalism, and in the collective consciousness of a society that refuses to accept that the scales of justice can be tipped by those who can afford to stay in the shadows. The path forward, though fraught with obstacles, is illuminated by a growing consensus that power, when left unchecked, corrodes the very values it purports to uphold. The narrative of George Clooney's new footage, set against the backdrop of the Epstein Island, is a stark reminder of the consequences when those values are compromised. It is a sobering lesson that the pursuit of truth must be relentless, and that the mechanisms of accountability must be resilient enough to confront the most entrenched forms of influence. The story's next chapters will be written in the courtroom, on the pages of investigative journalism, and in the collective consciousness of a society that refuses to accept that the scales of justice can be tipped by those who can afford to stay in the shadows.